Well, would you like to marry me for $850 and for 5 days? Yes, price of the marriage is $850 and it is for 5 days. Some of us be thinking that cannot be labeled as marriage. We would call that as prostitution. But in Islam, it is identified as marriage, and it is very much well practiced by Muslims who live in Middle East and travel to Indonesia. Now Indonesia become the headquarter for the temporary marriage, which Allah with his divine wisdom put together in Surah 4 verse 24, that you pay the price for the pleasure you receive from that sex for the short time. Temporary marriage. In Shia circle it is known as Mutah marriage. In Sunni circle it is known as Misyar marriage. Temporary marriage. Very ugly and very disgusting. Simply they are labeling prostitution as marriage and just getting around with that. Let's bring our attention to Indonesia. 87% population of Indonesia is Muslim, and these godly Muslims are seems doing very godly actions. Sex tourism in Indonesia sells itself as Islamic temporary marriage. If you ever wondered how you are gonna make money if you are Muslim and living in Indonesia, all you need to do is ask for temporary marriage. You will be pretty rich. This is very disturbing. Los Angeles Times shared the story of Kahaya with us. Kahaya first entered the temporary marriage when she was 17 years old with a Saudi man who was in his 50s. Yes, man in his 50s going after a child who is only 17 years old. See? Yep. They are doing exactly what their prophet did, but it seems Saudi Muslims have a little bit more dignity. They didn't go after babies, they are going after teenage kids. A tourist from Saudi Arabia turns up to Indonesia. He is in his 50s and the girl is only 17 years old. Under the Islamic law, they get married in 3-star hotel in Jakarta. In Islamic marriage, in this marriage you need witness and guardian. So her sister becomes guardian, and witness is the man who simply arranged this business, who simply arranged men from Saudi Arabia to pay the woman and have sex, or pay the girl and have sex with her for short time. Muslim, godly Muslim from Saudi Arabia paid $850 for dowry. So this $850 is for Muslim men to get access to her private part. $850. Woman, price of woman's vagina is $850. After the wedding took place, what they did, they drove 2 hours south of Jakarta. And well, when they are not having sex, what she did in her 5 days marriage life, she mopped the floors, cooked, watched telly, and chatted with Indonesian maids. And that marriage took for 5 days. So 5 days, and after five days, Muslim man simply uses the magical word talak and divorces her. I divorce you, and then marriage is over. It seems this is very common that Muslims from Middle East travel to Indonesia to simply have temporary marriage or simply practice Zina, prostitution. So godly thing to do. Nikah Mutah, or the pleasure marriage, is apparently become very common. They've got villages called divorcee villages. That's because soon after man finishes his business with the woman, he divorces her and then he goes back to his homeland, or he goes back after another woman. And these ladies end up being divorcee. So there are 1,000 people in her village. She knows 7 more women who is involved actively in temporary marriage. Allah is so kind, puts women in such a place. Thailand was the most popular destination for Middle Eastern Muslims to go and do their Mutah, practice their prostitution, practice their Zina. But that changed. Why? Because there are political disagreements between Saudi and Thailand. So now Muslims from Middle East, Muslims from Saudi focused on their attention to Indonesia, which is another Muslim nation. So Indonesia replaced Thailand. How? Because nation is 87% is Muslim. And those people were already familiar with many in Saudi Arabia as immigrants who had come to work as maids or drivers. See, they took over. Even there are villages in Indonesia known as Arab villages where Muslims from Middle East and Saudi comes simply to seek temporary marriage or do prostitution. Of course, there are the people who are doing pretty much quite a lot of money from that, brokers or middlemen. So Budi is 55 years old driver and interpreter. First time 30 years ago he was approached by a Middle Eastern man. Middle Eastern man asked him to arrange Islamic temporary marriage for him, and for last 30 years that's what he's been doing. He's connecting this Saudi godly Muslim man to godly Muslim woman of Indonesia for few days of sex, for few days for Muslim man to enjoy and get pleasure from her and pay her the money for the enjoyment he received from the sex. It is such a disturbing to read that in 1 month, there are as many as 25 Mutah is taking place, 25 temporary so-called marriage in 1 month. Kahaya learned about Islamic temporary marriage after she's been divorced. She got married at age 13. Age 13, her grandparents pushed her into the marriage. And 4 years after her marriage, she's been divorced. And that's when she heard about temporary marriage. In Indonesia, legal marriage age is 19. But because people are doing this under the religion, no one is bothering to look into it. Of course, if you are virgin, your price for your first temporary marriage is pretty high. So, Nisa, Kahaya's sister, her first temporary marriage or her first kind of selling herself was $3,000. Her dowry, which is she's receiving money to give men access to her private part, was $3,000. Why? Because she was virgin. If you are virgin, your price is high. But if you've been married and if you've been part of temporary marriage for a couple of times, price goes down, down, and down. Nisa, who received $3,000 as a dowry for temporary marriage, had approximate 20 temporary marriages. 20 temporary marriages. This woman has been used by minimum of 20 different Muslim men, mainly Middle Eastern and Saudi Muslim men, for their sexual pleasure. Listen to this very carefully. So Kahaya has recently had another temporary marriage, and her dowry was $2,000, which she gives away $700 and then keeps $1,300. And each month, Muslim man from Saudi Arabia, who is going to be her temporary marriage husband, is going to pay her $500. And he says to her, I will treat you as queen. And then takes her to Saudi. They got to Saudi and man turned her into slave. Saudi Muslim man who promised to treat her as queen, now using her as slave. She did all the housework without pay, while living on the 3rd floor of large house filled with relatives. She said he spit on her meals, screamed at her nightly, broke things, and often kicked her awake when she tried to sleep. So when Muslim man tells you, I will treat you as a queen, or when Muslim missionaries tells you, in Islam, woman is being treated as queen, Islamic definition for the queen is, woman is being used a slave. That's what it is. That's what it is. A woman is sharing her experiences, and she's been expressing, she turned into slave. Why? Because her husband promised to treat her as queen. This is what they do to their queens. She attempted to run away several times, but was always caught. Yeah, she was so happy she wanted to run away. Eventually, she called a middleman who spent months appealing for help to Saudi embassy in Jakarta and also other ministries in Indonesia. As Kahaya gets desperate, she finds out that her grandmother was dying, and of course, Muslim Saudi husband is not sending her to visit her dying grandma. What does she do? She tried to take her own life by cutting her left wrist with a knife and was taken to hospital. That speed up the process in embassy, and in March, finally, one of the relatives of her husband got her ticket and she left. So what we have here, godly Muslim man from Saudi is traveling to Indonesia, another Muslim country, for short time sex and paying the price for it. Price is $850, or if they get virgin, it's $3,000. Sometimes it's $300 for few days, and then going back to home to continue their godly life. This ugly prostitution, this zina is identified as marriage. This is very ugly. What kind of God would be okay with that? Oh, I know, it's only the God of Islam, as well as it is the Prophet of Islam who is happy with that. Allah, with his knowledge from the beginning, put temporary marriage in the Quran in Surah 424. In the time of Muhammad, Muslims practiced temporary marriage, and it is not even marriage, this is just nikah, that F word, and they sell it under the label of marriage. It should have no place in our society, but it has. It's very much growing business in Muslim majority countries. Why? Because godly Muslim men wants to practice their godly actions. All they want to do is just practice what Allah made halal. If Allah made something halal, who do you think you are going to make that haram? You are nobody, and you have no power. That this lovely pleasure marriage, this lovely short-term marriage, this lovely temporary marriage can't be stopped by you. Marriage is something very important. It is a covenant between man and woman until their life finishes in this earth. Yet Islam steps in and introduces these ugly teachings, temporary marriages, short-term marriages, pleasure marriages, abuses the covenant of marriage. And see how Muslims are making money from that, how Muslims women are being abused. Or you might be saying, this is amazing, see how Muslim woman is being treated as queen. This is not the life for queen. That is the not life that queen lives. All Islam does to you is make you slave, takes your value, takes your dignity, takes your honor. Keep away from Islam.